It's one of the world's most important relationships, the one between economic superpowers, the US and China. But that relationship hasn't been going well for some time now, marked by suspicion, distrust, competition and hostility. So could there be a chance to reset things? Well, the US and Chinese presidents, Joe Biden and Xi Jinping, are due to hold highly anticipated talks at the summit of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. That summit begins this weekend in San Francisco. Xi hasn't been to the US since 2017, and the two leaders haven't seen each other in person for a year. In a moment, I'll be speaking with a geopolitical strategist about their talks. But first, here's a quick reminder of where things stand right now.
This was the last time the leaders of the two rival superpowers met. A year ago at the G20 meeting in Bali. Much has changed since then. As the White House prepares for this long-awaited summit between Presidents Biden and Xi, it knows that it will be taking place against a geopolitical backdrop that has shifted significantly since the last time the two men met. The U.S. is now dealing with two wars, not just one, and it has every interest in preventing its most adversarial relationship from getting any more hostile. This includes tackling holdovers from past diplomatic disputes by, say, resuming military-to-military dialogue. That was suspended after a visit from then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan angered China. Another low point in relations, the U.S. takedown of a Chinese spy balloon earlier this year. Following months of diplomatic firefighting, analysts say the current climate has made it even more important for the U.S. to minimize the chances of mishaps leading to more tension.
Xi Jinping will undoubtedly want to talk about Taiwan. President Biden remains firmly committed to defending Taiwan, and he wants to strengthen deterrence to make sure that Xi Jinping doesn't miscalculate and that he understands if he tries to use force against Taiwan, there will be a great cost for China. But at the same time, I think that he wants to convey to Xi Jinping that the United States supports peaceful resolution of the differences between the two sides of the strait through dialogue, that it does not envision that the outcome of this is necessarily going to be an independent Taiwan.
But stabilizing communication won't be Biden's only aim in San Francisco. It's also expected that he will ask Xi to use his influence on Iran to help prevent an expansion of the conflict in the Middle East, something both Washington and Beijing are keen to avoid.
China would not want to see a widening of this conflict. It depends on the Middle East for about 50% of its energy and would not want to put that in jeopardy. And so they actually have an interest in preventing that war from widening. If they think that that's unlikely, then they probably will not act. But if they see that risk is growing, then perhaps Beijing will.
At APEC, whatever Xi and Biden achieve or don't achieve with the talks, it's the talking itself that both sides want to use to project a concerted effort to manage the world's most difficult but arguably most important bilateral relationship.
Velina Tchakarova is a geopolitical strategist and founder of the consultancy for a conscious experience. Welcome to DW News Asia. That piece we just saw discussed really how important it was for the US to minimise bilateral tensions with China and certainly not let them get any worse. Do you think that is as important to Xi Jinping as well?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, the bilateral relationship between the United States and China, especially when it comes to trade and economic ties, is at the core of the stability of the current global economic system. So obviously, both sides have a very strong interest in stabilizing the ties and actually providing for internal stability at home. Of course, both actors, United States and China, have a different agenda right now, with the US preparing for election year. But on the side of China, we, of course, have a very strong interest, which is to stabilize the economy and to steer the economic engine at home, given the rather dire situation, which, of course, from the perspective of Xi Jinping is the most important.
If we stay on these economic ties, how does Xi's desire to kickstart China's economy square off against the fact that US strategy really isn't focused on economic cooperation with China, but rather competition?
Yes, of course, we know for a fact that Biden administration has introduced this kind of 3C approach, which is centered around competition, confrontation and collaboration. And obviously the collaboration part is the scarce one, mostly focusing on climate issues and global health problems. But let's take a look at the China's priorities. And here what we may expect is actually a focus on the tariffs on Chinese goods, and which were imposed under Section 301 of U.S. trade law. We have also the semiconductor ban. I mean, semiconductors are going to be a big issue in the bilateral and also in the multilateral track. The two-way investment restrictions and the discriminatory subsidies that are put under U.S. legislation. I think that these are actually main priorities, next to, of course, the sanctions against Chinese companies. This will be probably the package that China is going to touch upon in the bilateral conversations with the U.S. counterparts.
And what about military-to-military cooperation?
Of course, this is the second most important track next to the track on economic and trade ties. We've seen a lot of activities in the last months when it comes to high-ranking bilateral meetings covering the economic and the trade ties. But let's not forget that we have a very dire situation when it comes to the lack of military-to-military communications. And I think that this specific meeting between Biden and Xi Jinping will actually seek to restore the military communication channels. Why? Because we see that there is a rise of military escalation in South China Sea, in the Strait of Taiwan, and of course both sides want to prevent any miscalculation and want to also decrease the risk of, let's say, certain behavior that may result in further escalation in the region.
That leads me to my next question. How much time and focus do you expect Biden and Xi to spend talking about Taiwan?
Well, of course, Taiwan is, from U.S. perspective, Taiwan is a very big issue, and it will very much depend also on who is going to win the presidential election, because we know for a fact that even though there is quite a bipartisan support for Taiwan coming from both parties, we have very different views on the matter when it comes to the U.S. approach to Taiwan. And of course, there is also a very split view on whether China may militarily attack Taiwan or not in the next few years. So here I think that the Taiwan itself as an issue will not be really on the agenda because of the sensitivity when it comes to the China's reaction. And I think that the Biden administration will be really eager to restore as much of the bilateral dialogue as possible in various domains, as I said. So I do not expect that Taiwan will be really a big issue in the conversations.
Geopolitical strategist Velina Tchakarova, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate it.